So picture this. It's 2 a.m., you're staring at a booking screen, and there it is.
A glitch in the matrix.
Right, exactly. A direct transatlantic flight for like $150. It feels totally fake, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
You're tempted. I mean, we've all been tempted by that. But as your finger is kind of hovering over that buy button, you start to wonder, like, how on earth does an airline fly a massive metal tube across an ocean for less than the cost of a nice dinner?
Yeah, the math just it doesn't seem to add up.
It really doesn't. And more importantly, why do so many of these budget long-haul airlines seem to just vanish into thin air a few years after they launch?
Well, it's basically the ultimate aviation illusion. You see that dirt cheap fare on your screen,
Yeah.
but what you don't see is the incredibly fragile economic tightrope that airline is walking behind the scenes just to keep those engines turning.
And that is exactly the mission of today's deep dive. We are going to solve the puzzle of long-haul, low-cost airlines. We want to understand why this specific business model thrives in certain markets, but just completely crashes and burns in others.
Right.
And to do this, we've pulled a massive stack of sources for our conversation today. We've got historical aviation records, deep economic analyses of the U.S. airline industry, and current market reports on long-haul routes.
Yeah, and to set a baseline for you, let's just look at the current landscape. Right now, if we define a long-haul flight as anything over 3,400 nautical miles,
Which is pretty far.
right, it's a long flight. There are just 14 airlines operating long-haul, low-cost services today.
Yeah.
But here's the really staggering part of that data. Out of those 14, only 5 have actually managed to survive since 2015.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because a survival rate of, what, roughly a third over a single decade? That is brutal in any industry.
It really is.
So, to understand why long-haul budget flying is so incredibly difficult, we have to understand the fundamental DNA of airline cost structures. And that means taking a quick trip back in time to the dawn of deregulation.
Yeah, you really have to look at the environment that birthed the traditional legacy airlines. The Americans, Deltas, and Uniteds of the world.
Right.
From 1938 all the way until 1978, the U.S. Civil Aeronautics Board, or the CAB, essentially treated airlines like public utilities.
Like the water or power company.
Exactly. There was absolutely no real price competition. The government approved every single route and set fares based on a really strict cost-plus formula.
Wait, so if the government is setting the prices based on costs, were the airlines basically operating with a guaranteed profit margin?
They were. The CAB guaranteed a 12% return on investment.
Wow.
So let's think about the math there. If your profit is a fixed percentage of your costs, what is your corporate incentive?
To spend as much money as humanly possible.
Exactly. Your incentive is to make your costs as high as legally possible. I mean, if it costs you $100 to operate a flight, you make $12. But if you inflate your operation so it costs $1,000, the government guarantees you $120.
Oh, wow. So there was literally zero incentive to run a lean business. It was a completely inverted economic reality.
Completely inverted. And this regulatory environment is exactly what built the quote-unquote legacy airline model.
Right. They had all the money in the world.
Yeah, they created these massive, highly complex hub-and-spoke networks, meaning they flew everyone to central hubs like Atlanta or Chicago to sort them like mail.
Yeah.
They had highly unionized workforces with gold-plated pensions. They flew diverse fleets of a dozen different types of planes, and they offered all these built-in passenger amenities.
Free meals, free bags, tons of legroom.
Exactly. They functioned way more like public services than ruthless, profit-driven businesses.
But then, 1978 hits. The Airline Deregulation Act passes. Suddenly, that whole protective government bubble bursts, and in come the low-cost carriers, or LCCs, completely disrupting the market.
Right.
And Southwest Airlines is the famous pioneer here, right? They essentially looked at the bloated legacy model and just did the exact opposite.
Pretty much. They engineered this absolute obsession with slashing unit costs. In the industry, they measure this as CASM cost per available seat mile.
Okay.
And LCCs drove their CSM into the ground through extreme operational discipline. First, they completely ignored that complex hub-and-spoke model and flew strict point-to-point routes.
So if you wanted to go from Dallas to Houston, they just flew you there directly.
Exactly. No connecting in some massive hub.
And our sources highlight that they simplified their fleets too, right?
Drastically. I mean, instead of operating Boeings and Airbuses and Douglas jets all at once, an LCC would standardize their entire operation to a single aircraft type. usually the Boeing 737.
Right.
And that single decision trickles down to literally everything. You only need one inventory of spare parts. Your mechanics only need to learn one type of engine.
And your pilots can fly literally any plane in the fleet. That is so smart. Now, the documentation also mentions they refuse to do quote-unquote interlining. Can you explain how that saves money?
Oh, interlining is a huge hidden cost for traditional airlines. Say you book a ticket from Omaha to Paris on a legacy carrier. You might fly Delta to New York and then connect on to Air France.
Right, they sell that as one ticket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to make that seamless for you, Delta and Air France have to link their billion-dollar IT mainframes. They have to split the ticket revenue, track your luggage across completely different handling systems, and agree on who pays for your hotel if the first flight is delayed.
Wow, so it's a massive headache behind the scenes.
It's an operational nightmare. And the LCCs looked at that mess and simply refused. They just said, we fly from point A to point B. If you want to connect to another airline, go buy a separate ticket and grab your own bag.
I love this entire comparison. So if we think about it, a legacy airline is like a luxury cruise ship.
Right. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's built for comfort, it requires a massive crew to operate, it serves filet mignon, and it's incredibly complex to run. An LCC, on the other hand, is basically a stripped-down commuter ferry.
Yeah.
It has hard seats, zero frills, and it just needs to run back and forth across the harbor as many times a day as possible without breaking down. The ferry makes its money on sheer volume and those fast 30-minute turnarounds at the dock.
That is a perfect analogy for domestic flying.
But here's my pushback. How does a commuter ferry suddenly cross an ocean? I mean, doesn't the whole low-cost model fundamentally break down when the flight is 10 hours long and you literally can't do rapid 30-minute turnarounds?
You've hit on the exact core mathematical trap of long-haul budget flying.
Oh, really?
Yeah. On a short 2-hour domestic hop, an LCC's ability to turn a plane around at the gate in 30 minutes means they can squeeze in 2 or 3 more revenue-generating flights per day than a legacy carrier.
Okay, that makes sense.
That high daily aircraft utilization is the beating heart of their cost advantage.
Right, because the plane is only actually making money when it's up in the sky.
Exactly. But look what happens on a 10-hour transatlantic flight. That plane is in the air all day anyway, regardless of whether it's a budget airline or a legacy carrier.
Oh, right.
So the utilization advantage just evaporates. Furthermore, on a long flight, your absolute biggest expenses, which are fuel and aircraft ownership costs, they basically equalize.
Because a plane is a plane.
Right. A Boeing 787 burns the exact same amount of expensive jet fuel over the Atlantic, whether the logo on the tail is a budget brand or a premium one. So the LCC loses its main structural advantage, but they still have to sell you that $150 ticket.
Wow. Knowing that the math is aggressively stacked against this, it makes the desperate tactics of the 1990s and 2000s even more fascinating.
Oh, it was wild.
Because legacy carriers, they're watching these new budget airlines steal their domestic lunch money, and they went into a total panic. But instead of doing the hard work to fix their own high overhead and bloated structures, they tried a shortcut.
Yeah, they did.
They decided to just try and clone the LCCs.
Yeah, this birthed the era of the airline within an airline, or AWA. It was a wildly trendy defensive strategy at the time. The major carriers decided they would launch their own spun-off budget subsidiaries to defend their fortress hubs from the encroaching LCCs.
And the historical records on these attempts are just spectacular failures.
Total disasters.
We're talking about U.S. Airways launching Metrojet, United launching TED, and Delta launching Song. Practically all of them failed within a few years, bleeding hundreds of millions of dollars from their parent companies.
Yeah, and when you dissect why they failed, you get a literal masterclass in poor strategic execution. First, just look at their fleet choices. To compete with the hyper-efficient modern fleets of the actual LCCs like Southwest, these legacy parents treated their new budget brands like a corporate hand-me-down bin.
Oh, right. The aviation records point out that U.S. Airways tried to have Metrojet compete directly with Southwest, but while Southwest was flying newer, highly efficient planes, U.S. Airways handed Metrojet a fleet of aging Boeing 737-200s.
Right, the really old ones.
Yeah, these were older, gas-guzzling planes. I mean, the fuel math alone destroyed any chance they had at matching a true low-cost carrier's bottom line.
Absolutely. And beyond the hardware, the deeper fatal structural flaw was the labor. You have to remember these subsidiaries were still operating under the parent company's corporate umbrella.
Okay, so they shared the same unions.
Exactly. Mainline labor unions saw these budget spin-offs as a direct threat to their hard-won wages and seniority-based contracts.
So how did that actually play out on the ground?
It meant the unions successfully blocked the budget subsidiaries from adopting the flexible work rules that independent LCCs enjoyed.
Like what, exactly?
Well, for example, a mainline legacy flight attendant contract often includes quote-unquote trip breaks, meaning they get paid for time away from their home base, even if they were just sleeping in a hotel between flights.
Oh, wow.
Right? But an independent LCC flight attendant might only get paid per flight hour, strictly when the aircraft doors are actually closed.
So these legacy carriers were trying to charge budget airline ticket prices, but they were legally forced to pay legacy union wages.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a guaranteed recipe for a corporate hemorrhage. And we can't ignore the marketing failures either, which led to massive brand cannibalization and just totally confused consumers.
Wow.
Delta's song is my absolute favorite disaster in this era.
Oh, the marketing for song was certainly a choice.
It was bizarre. They completely lost the plot of what a budget airline is actually supposed to be. They specifically targeted, quote, hip, style-conscious professional women, and they insisted on marketing themselves as a culture rather than an airline.
Right, with the organic food and everything.
Yeah. They were serving organic meals and custom cocktails. It's like a corporate dad putting on a backward baseball cap and trying to hang out with teenagers.
Exactly.
If I want a cheap flight to Florida, I don't need a lifestyle brand or a culture. I literally just need a cheap ticket.
What's fascinating here is how fundamentally these legacy airlines misunderstood the low-cost model. They honestly believed you could slap a fresh coat of paint, a trendy name, and a brightly colored uniform on a high-cost operation and magically transform it into a budget airline.
Just fake it till you make it.
Right. But the underlying structural costs, the pensions, the complex maintenance facilities, the rigid labor contracts, they remained exactly the same. They created the illusion of a low-cost carrier without doing any of the grueling operational work required to actually lower costs.
It's such a brutal lesson. But while the American legacy carriers were failing miserably at the airline with an airline concept, carriers over in the Asia-Pacific region were watching the carnage, taking notes, and completely rewriting the playbook.
They were.
And they actually found a way to make it work.
They absolutely did. When we look at that short list of the 5 long-term survivors in the long-haul, low-cost space today, you see names like Qantas's Jetstar and Singapore Airlines Scoot.
Which are technically AWS's, right?
Technically, yes. These are both airlines within an airline. But they succeeded where Ted and Song totally crashed and burned.
So if the Americans failed because their subsidiaries were hopelessly tied down by legacy baggage, the only way the Asia-Pacific carriers could have succeeded is if they somehow, cut the umbilical cord completely.
That is precisely the difference. It comes down to ruthless separation and managerial autonomy. Unlike the American experiments, Jetstar and Scoot were established as truly separate corporate entities from their parent companies. They have distinct headquarters, separate management teams, and crucially, completely separate labor structures.
And geography plays a massive role there, doesn't it?
A huge role. Because they operate in the Asia-Pacific region, they leverage geographic arbitrage. They can offshore a significant portion of their labor cabin crew bases and maintenance facilities to countries in Southeast Asia where wages are drastically lower than in Australia or Singapore.
So they aren't bound by those legacy union contracts.
Right. This keeps their CSM structurally separated from their mainline parents.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. They aren't just surviving off cheap offshore labor. They are actually playing a highly strategic, offensive role for their parent companies.
Yes, they are.
The market reports we looked at describe an airline like Jetstar as acting almost like a corporate scout. It tests out new, unproven leisure routes that Qantas doesn't want to risk flying.
Exactly.
Wait, hold on. If Jetstar takes all the risk to test a route and it proves to be highly profitable, doesn't Qantas just swoop in and steal it? I mean, that just sounds like a corporate parent cannibalizing their own kid's success.
It definitely looks like that from the outside, but it's actually a highly coordinated dual brand shield strategy. The parent company actively uses the low-cost subsidiary as a weapon to clear the battlefield.
How so?
Well, Jetstar will enter a new market with rock-bottom fares. This stimulates demand, gets people used to flying the route, and crucially, starves out any rival budget airlines trying to gain a foothold.
So they basically drop prices so low that competitors just suffocate.
Yes, And once the market matures and passengers on that route start demanding more comfort and are willing to actually pay for it, Qantas will slide their mainline premium planes onto the route.
Wow.
Jetstar is intentionally kept subordinate. They work in tandem, capturing both the extreme budget traveler who wants a $50 seat and the corporate traveler who wants a lie flat bed. Competitors find themselves locked out of both ends of the market.
Okay, I see the genius in that. It makes total sense if you have a massive, wealthy legacy parent company backing you up, absorbing the risk, and kind of coordinating the chess pieces.
Right.
But what if an airline doesn't have a legacy parent bankrolling them? Because there are independent survivors on our list of long-haul budget airlines too, and they seem to find stability not through massive scale, but by hyper-focusing on intensely loyal niche markets.
That's the alternative survival path. When you don't have a parent company's premium revenue to act as a safety net, you have to find markets with guaranteed year-round demand.
You can't rely on tourists.
Exactly. You have to step entirely away from the highly volatile, unpredictable tourist routes. Let's look at independent players like Cebu Pacific out of the Philippines and Lion Air out of Indonesia.
Right.
These are massive regional airlines, but their specific long-haul success comes from serving the Middle East.
And they aren't exactly flying tourists to Dubai for luxury shopping sprees, are they?
Not at all. They're specifically flying expatriate worker markets and religious pilgrim markets between Southeast Asia and the Middle East.
So the key there is the consistency of the passenger.
It is the ultimate golden ticket in aviation, inelastic demand. These aren't people deciding on a whim to take a cheap weekend vacation to Paris, who might, cancel if the euro gets too expensive.
Right.
These are laborers traveling for employment contracts or pilgrims traveling for deeply held religious obligations. The demand simply does not evaporate just because the global economy takes a dip or because it's the wrong season.
We see a very similar opportunistic strategy with Azul Airlines down in Brazil. The data shows they use a mixed fleet of Airbus A330s, which, as we discussed earlier, is usually a big no-no for low-cost carriers who prefer single-fleet types.
Right, usually terrible for costs.
Yeah, but they use them specifically to serve diaspora communities. They fly targeted routes from Brazil to Florida and Portugal, serving people going back and forth to visit family.
Yes, exactly.
This makes total sense. It's the difference between running a tourist sightseeing bus in a city where you have to constantly spend millions on marketing to convince people to take a vacation versus running a dedicated commuter bus for factory workers.
Right.
The commuter bus is full every single day, no marketing required because the passengers literally have to be there.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that guaranteed stability is absolutely vital because of something called load factors.
Okay, what's that?
Well, think about how traditional legacy airlines survived the slow travel months, like February. They can afford to fly a massive Boeing 777 half empty because the 10 corporate passengers sitting up front in business class paid $10,000 each.
Ah, right.
Those premium tickets subsidize the empty economy seats in the back.
But budget airlines don't have business class.
Exactly. Long-haul LCCs don't have that massive premium buffer. They rely entirely on high load factors, meaning the plane essentially has to be packed full of budget travelers, like 90% full on every single flight, just to generate enough cash to pay for the fuel and the crew.
Wow.
If a tourist route dips to 60% full in the off-season, the budget airline is bleeding cash immediately.
Which perfectly transitions us into the danger zone, because even with a rich parent company like Qantas or a dedicated niche commuter route, operating a long-haul, low-cost airline today is essentially walking a tightrope in a hurricane.
It really is.
External economic pressures are actively threatening the very existence of these business models as we speak.
Yeah, the overarching vulnerability hovering over the entire sector right now is the concept of critical mass.
Right.
To survive the inevitable constant shocks of the aviation industry, things like sudden jet fuel price spikes, global pandemics, or massive currency fluctuations, an airline needs immense scale to absorb the blow.
And these budget guys don't have it.
No, when we look at the operational data for the 14 long-haul LCCs flying today, only Jetstar and Azul operate more than 20 daily long-haul flights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the vast majority of these airlines are operating in the low double digits. They simply do not have the fleet size or route network to buffer against a sudden downturn.
And that lack of scale makes them hyper vulnerable to seasonal churn and bad bets. We saw this recently with North Atlantic. They tried to run a London to Vegas route, but the tourist demand just wasn't consistent enough year-round.
Right, it completely failed.
It failed, and to survive, they ended up having to lease out their actual airplanes to another airline, Indigo, just to generate emergency cash flow.
Yeah, a total scramble.
Now, Norse is attempting to fly from Athens to New York, going head-to-head against a luxury giant like Emirates. That seems like an incredibly massive risk, especially when you factor in external forces like a strong U.S. dollar and shifting consumer spending power due to inflation.
Well, it's hugely risky.
If you don't have the scale to absorb a loss, one bad route can basically sink the whole company.
Furthermore, the very core foundation of the LCC model, which is cheap, highly productive labor, is eroding rapidly beneath their feet. Post-pandemic, the entire global aviation industry is facing a severe pilot and staffing shortage.
And that drives up wages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Aging staff at LCCs are gaining seniority, they're unionizing more aggressively, and demanding higher wages to match the market rate. As a result, the labor cost advantage that LCCs have historically relied upon to keep fares low is shrinking at double the rate of legacy carriers.
And while the LCCs are struggling with rising pilot costs and inflation, the legacy airlines haven't just been sitting still, letting their market share get eaten.
Oh no, they fought back.
They've struck back with a vengeance through a concept we all know and tolerate. Basic economy.
Everyone's favorite.
Right. Think about the last time you flew a major legacy carrier and realized you had to pay extra just to pick a middle seat or pay to bring a carry-on bag, and you were forced to board the plane dead last.
Yeah.
That is the legacy carriers completely unbundling their tickets. They've figured out how to mathematically capture the hyper-price-sensitive flyer in the back of the plane while still offering thousands of dollars in premium upgrades to corporate flyers in the front.
Exactly.
Wait a minute, though. If legacy airlines are stripping away free bags and meals to lower their base fares and act like budget airlines, and LCCs are starting to charge for premium seats with extra legroom and Wi-Fi to try and boost their revenue, aren't they just tunneling through the mountain from opposite sides and meeting in the middle?
Yes.
Is the low-cost label even real anymore?
You've perfectly identified what industry analysts are now calling the Great Convergence.
A great convergence.
Yeah. The hard historical lines between legacy and low cost are blurring into total obsolescence. Moving forward, the surviving airline model likely won't be strictly one or the other. It will be a hybrid.
That mix of both worlds.
Right. Airlines of the future will need to utilize the aggressive cost discipline and operational efficiency of the LCCs behind the scenes while aggressively segmenting the customer in the cabin, offering everything from bare bones, no-bag, basic economy to premium lie-flat suites on the exact same aircraft.
So what does this all mean? I mean, that is an incredible evolution of the industry. Okay, let's wrap up our journey today. We set out to understand why long-haul, low-cost airlines are such a volatile puzzle.
And they really are.
We've seen that they fail spectacularly when legacy airlines try to fake the budget model while holding on to bloated structural costs and restrictive union rules. But they can succeed and do succeed through fierce managerial autonomy and offshore labor, through powerful dual-brand parent company backing, or by ignoring the flashy tourist traps and targeting highly specific year-round commuter niches with inelastic demand.
But I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder before you book your next trip.
Okay.
As these airlines fight to make the brutal, razor-thin economics of long-haul budget flying work, their main lever for profitability is cramming more and more seats into the cabin to increase load factors.
Oh, yeah, the shrinking legroom.
Right. We are now seeing 13-hour flights proposed with a mere 28 inches of seat pitch between rows. At what point does passenger physical health, specifically the elevated risk of deep vein thrombosis from being completely immobilized in cramped spaces for half a day, become a massive regulatory issue?
That's a great question.
Will future health and safety mandates regarding minimum passenger space ultimately regulate ultra-low-cost long-haul out of existence before the economics even get a chance to?
That is a genuinely chilling thought for anyone trying to sleep sitting straight up in seat 42E. Keep questioning the systems and the world around you, because the next time it's 2 a.m. and you click buy on that dirt cheap $150 transatlantic ticket, remember, you aren't just going on a vacation. You are actively participating in one of the most volatile, high-stakes economic experiments in modern business.